Before recorded history, before the Great Flood is said to have washed the world clean, the earth was a very different place. It was a world walking a razor's edge between the divine and the mortal, a world where the line between heaven and earth was terrifyingly thin. It was a world of giants. The Bible mentions them in Genesis 6, calling them mighty men who were of old, men of renown. But these few cryptic verses hint at a story so profound, so world-altering, that it's been debated for thousands of years. This is the story of the Nephilim, and it doesn't start on earth. It starts with a rebellion in the heavens. Just before the epic tale of Noah and the Great Flood unfolds, the book of Genesis presents us with a passage so mysterious, so enigmatic, that it has puzzled readers for thousands of years. Nestled within just 4 verses, Genesis 6 offers a glimpse into a world that seems almost mythic, a world where the boundaries between the divine and the mortal blur in ways that challenge our understanding of the ancient past. Genesis 6 describes a forbidden union that has sparked debate for centuries. The sons of God gazed upon human women, were captivated by their beauty, and took them as wives. This brief but potent description has become one of the most hotly contested passages in all of biblical literature. The text continues, "The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them." These children, the Nephilim, are described as mighty men of old, men of renown. But who or what were they really? For millennia, everyone from learned scholars to mystical sages has wrestled with the meaning of these verses. The passage is shrouded in ambiguity, and its implications are profound. Are we reading about a spiritual allegory, or is this a record of supernatural events that defy our modern sensibilities? The central questions remain: who exactly were these sons of God? Were they simply men, or something far more extraordinary? And what about their offspring, the Nephilim? Were they giants, heroes, or monsters? The answers have eluded definitive explanation, giving rise to a spectrum of interpretations that reflect the diversity of human imagination and belief. Over the centuries, 2 major schools of thought have emerged to explain this cryptic passage. The first is known as the Sethite view, a theory that seeks to ground the story in the realm of human history and morality. According to the Sethite interpretation, after the fall of Adam and Eve, humanity split into 2 distinct family lines. On one side were the descendants of Seth, Adam's righteous son, who sought to walk in the ways of God. On the other were the descendants of Cain, the first murderer, whose line was marked by violence and rebellion. In this view, the sons of God are not angels or supernatural beings, but the godly men descended from Seth. The daughters of man are the women descended from Cain, representing a lineage tainted by sin and estrangement from God. The great transgression, then, was not a violation of the natural order, but a spiritual compromise. The holy bloodline of Seth intermarried with the corrupt line of Cain, eroding the distinction between good and evil. This mixing of the 2 lines, according to the Sethite view, led to a society so morally bankrupt, so steeped in wickedness, that divine intervention became inevitable. The flood, in this interpretation, was God's response to a world that had lost its way. But the Sethite view is not the only explanation. In fact, it is a relatively recent interpretation, gaining prominence only in the last 2,000 years. There is another, much older theory, one that is both more dramatic and more unsettling. This ancient perspective was common in early Judaism, and was embraced by many of the first Christian thinkers. It suggests that the sons of God were not human at all, but celestial beings, angels who crossed a forbidden boundary. According to this view, the original Hebrew phrase Bene Ha-Elohim is key. In other parts of the Old Testament, such as the Book of Job, this phrase unmistakably refers to angelic beings, not mortals. This interpretation opens the door to a story of cosmic rebellion and forbidden desire. Proponents of the angelic view argue that these were not ordinary men but powerful spiritual entities who abandoned their heavenly posts. Their actions were not just a breach of social norms but a violation of the very order of creation. In the Book of Job, Bene Ha-Elohim clearly means angels, beings who dwell in the presence of God. If Genesis 6 uses the same language, then the story is not about human families but about a cosmic drama that played out on the stage of early Earth. This interpretation suggests a rebellion of cosmic proportions. Divine beings, driven by desire or defiance, descended from the heavens to mingle with humanity. Their union with mortal women was an act of transgression that shattered the boundaries between the spiritual and the physical. The children born from these unions were the Nephilim, beings who were neither fully human nor fully divine. Described as giants, heroes, and men of renown, the Nephilim became legendary figures whose presence on Earth was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The very word Nephilim has been translated as fallen ones, hinting at their origins and their fate. Were they giants in the literal sense, towering over ordinary humans? Or were they giants in reputation, remembered for their extraordinary deeds and tragic downfall? The story of the Nephilim has inspired countless legends, from tales of ancient giants to myths of demigods and heroes. Some traditions even suggest that the echoes of the Nephilim can be found in the stories of other cultures, hinting at a shared memory of a time when the divine and the mortal walked side by side. The mystery of the Nephilim, and the true identity of the sons of God, continues to captivate the imagination. Are these verses a cryptic record of supernatural events? Or a symbolic warning about the dangers of crossing moral and spiritual boundaries? Whatever the answer, the story of Genesis 6 remains one of the most intriguing and debated passages in all of Scripture, a testament to the enduring power of myth, mystery, and the search for meaning in the ancient world. The Bible leaves the story right there, hanging in mystery. But if you look beyond its pages, into the dusty corners of ancient libraries and the forgotten scrolls of the past, you'll find that the story continues in ways that are both fascinating and terrifying. Other ancient texts, which were well known at the time of Jesus and the apostles, fill in the details that Genesis only hints at, details that paint a much darker and more complex picture of humanity's earliest days. The most important of these is the Book of Enoch. Now, the Book of Enoch isn't in most Bibles today, but it was a huge deal in Second Temple Judaism. In fact, it was so influential that it shaped the beliefs of entire communities, and its echoes can be heard in the writings of early Christian thinkers. The Book of Enoch was considered by many to be a key to understanding the mysteries of the ancient world, especially the origins of evil and the supernatural forces that seemed to haunt humanity. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church preserved the full text, keeping it as part of their sacred scriptures for centuries, even as it disappeared from the Western canon. For them, Enoch's visions and warnings were too important to lose, a vital link to the ancient world and its cosmic struggles. We've found pieces of it among the Dead Sea Scrolls, hidden away in desert caves for nearly 2,000 years. These fragments prove that the Book of Enoch was read and revered by Jewish communities long before the rise of Christianity. And it's even referenced in the New Testament book of Jude, which quotes Enoch directly, showing just how influential this mysterious text really was. Enoch tells the story that Genesis only hints at. It says the sons of God were a specific group of angels called the Watchers. These weren't just any angels. They were powerful celestial beings tasked with watching over humanity, guardians of the boundary between heaven and earth. But something went terribly wrong. Led by an angel named Semyaza, 200 of them made a pact, descended on Mount Hermon, and driven by lust, took human wives. This wasn't a random act, it was a coordinated rebellion, a deliberate crossing of the line between the divine and the mortal. The Watchers, once protectors, became transgressors, and their actions would change the world forever. But their sin was much worse than just lust. According to Enoch, these fallen angels taught humanity forbidden knowledge, secrets from heaven that mankind was never meant to have. They introduced arts and sciences that were far beyond the understanding of early humans, giving them tools and powers that would ultimately lead to their downfall. The Watchers became the first teachers of civilization, but their lessons were laced with corruption. The Book of Enoch goes into detail about the kinds of knowledge the Watchers shared. They taught people how to work metals, to forge weapons and armor, and to wage war on one another. They revealed the secrets of the stars and the movements of the heavens, introducing astrology and divination. They taught the use of roots and herbs, not just for healing but for sorcery and enchantment. Humanity, once innocent, was now armed with dangerous knowledge that would spread chaos and destruction. An angel named Azazel taught men how to make swords and shields, the arts of war. Others taught sorcery, astrology, and how to make potions. These gifts, which seemed like blessings at first, quickly became curses, fueling violence, greed, and the lust for power. The world was changing, and not for the better. They basically unleashed cosmic secrets that corrupted human society, filling the world with violence and greed. And the children of this union were the Nephilim. These beings were not just larger than life, they were the stuff of nightmares, towering over ordinary humans and dominating the ancient world with their strength and ferocity. The Book of Enoch describes them as giants, not just in size, but in their appetites. These giants supposedly devoured all of humanity's food and resources. They were insatiable, consuming everything in their path, leaving famine and devastation wherever they went. The Nephilim became a symbol of unchecked desire and the consequences of forbidden knowledge. When that ran out, they started eating people. The ancient texts describe a world where the boundaries between human and monster were blurred, where the children of angels and women became predators, turning on the very people they once lived among, and then, they turned on each other, consuming flesh and drinking blood. The world wasn't just sinful anymore, it was contaminated. The violence and corruption spread like a disease, infecting every corner of creation. The Nephilim, once mighty, became monsters, and their reign of terror threatened to destroy everything. The chaos unleashed by the Watchers and their offspring was so great that it left the world in ruins. Ancient cities fell, civilizations crumbled, and the earth itself seemed to cry out under the weight of so much bloodshed and sorrow. The very fabric of creation was unraveling, and hope was fading fast. An unholy hybrid race was corrupting the very fabric of creation, and it was becoming clear that a divine reset was needed. The stage was set for a cosmic intervention, a flood that would wash away the corruption and give humanity a chance to begin again. But the legacy of the Watchers and the Nephilim would echo through history, a warning of what happens when the boundaries between heaven and earth are shattered. This brings us to the Great Flood. In the Bible, the flood is a direct response to humanity's wickedness. But if we read it with the fallen angel story in mind, the flood takes on a much more specific purpose. It wasn't just a punishment for bad behavior, it was an act of surgical purification. It was a planetary cleansing to wipe out a corrupted genetic line that threatened to swallow humanity whole. A key clue is in how the Bible describes Noah. Genesis 6:9 says, "Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time." That phrase, blameless in his generations, is really interesting. Most people read it as morally perfect, but some researchers think it could have a biological meaning. The Hebrew word for blameless is tamim, which is the exact same word used in the Old Testament to describe a perfect, unblemished animal for sacrifice, one with no physical defects. In that context, blameless in his generations could mean that Noah's family tree was pure, that his bloodline was one of the few left on Earth that hadn't been corrupted by Nephilim DNA. He wasn't just chosen for his good character but for his genetic integrity. He was, in this view, 100% human. This suggests the flood was God's last-ditch effort to save a pure humanity from which a savior could one day come. God was literally washing the world clean of this angelic human hybrid DNA. The flood was a cataclysmic event, a divine reset that swept away a world corrupted by violence and the mysterious Nephilim. When the waters receded, it seemed as if the slate had been wiped clean. No more giants, no more angelic interference, just Noah and his family stepping into a new beginning. The earth was fresh, the air was pure, and for a moment it looked as though humanity had a second chance to walk in harmony with the divine. But then, Genesis 6:4 throws us a curveball. A small phrase that has sparked centuries of debate and wonder. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. This single line has puzzled scholars, theologians, and curious minds alike. How could the Nephilim, these legendary giants, exist both before and after the flood? Wasn't the flood supposed to be the end of their story? The question lingers. If the flood destroyed all life except for those on the ark, how did giants reappear in the generations that followed? There are a couple of intriguing theories. One suggests that the sin of the Watchers, the fallen angels who fathered the Nephilim, was not a one-time event. Perhaps after the flood, a second, smaller group of these rebellious beings descended to Earth, repeating the forbidden union and giving rise to a new generation of giants. This idea paints a picture of a cosmic struggle with divine boundaries being tested again and again. Another theory looks to genetics. What if the Nephilim DNA somehow survived the flood, hidden within the bloodline of Noah's family? The Bible is silent on the ancestry of Noah's sons' wives, leaving open the possibility that one of them carried the genetic legacy of the giants. This would mean that, even as the world was cleansed, a remnant of the old corruption lingered, waiting to resurface in future generations. Whatever the mechanism, the biblical narrative is clear. Giants did walk the earth again. Centuries after the flood, when the Israelites prepared to enter the Promised Land, they sent spies to scout the territory. What they found shook them to their core. The land was inhabited by people of enormous stature, so intimidating that the spies described themselves as mere grasshoppers in comparison. In the book of Numbers, the spies report, "We saw the Nephilim there. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." These post-flood giants were known by many names: the Anakim, the Rephaim, the Zamzummim, but they all shared the same terrifying reputation. Their presence was so overwhelming that it nearly derailed the Israelites' mission, filling them with fear and doubt. Among these legendary figures, one name stands out above all: Goliath of Gath. Towering over his opponents, Goliath was a descendant of these ancient clans. While the Bible doesn't explicitly call him a Nephilim, it draws a direct line from the giants of old to the enemies faced by Israel's greatest heroes. Goliath's defeat at the hands of David is more than just a story of courage. It's the climax of a struggle that began with the Watchers and the Nephilim, a battle between the remnants of a corrupted past and the hope for a redeemed future. The wars between the Israelites and the giant tribes were not just territorial conflicts. They were seen as a continuation of the cosmic battle that started before the flood, a fight to reclaim the land from the shadow of the Nephilim and restore it to its intended purpose. Every clash with the Anakim or the Rephaim was a step in a larger divine campaign to purge the world of the lingering influence of the fallen angels. Suddenly, the harsh command for the Israelites to completely destroy these tribes in Canaan takes on a new dimension. It wasn't just about conquest or survival, it was about finishing what the flood had started. The eradication of the giants was seen as the final phase of a divine cleanup operation, a necessary step to ensure that the corruption of the Nephilim would never threaten humanity again. Ancient scrolls and oral traditions echo this theme, hinting at a world where the boundaries between the human and the divine were dangerously blurred. The Nephilim were more than just physical giants. They were symbols of a time when the order of creation was upended, when the sons of God crossed forbidden lines and left a legacy of chaos. The image of fallen angels descending to earth is a haunting reminder of the risks of unchecked power and rebellion. Their actions set in motion a chain of events that would echo through generations, shaping the destiny of nations and the faith of millions. Even today, the story of the Nephilim captures our imagination. We see echoes of their legend in myths and folklore around the world, tales of giants, demigods, and ancient beings who walked among mortals. The fascination endures because the Nephilim represent the ultimate mystery. What happens when the divine and the human collide, and what price must be paid to restore balance? The fall of Goliath is more than a victory for David, it's a symbol of hope. It shows that even the mightiest giants born of ancient rebellion can be defeated by faith, courage, and the will to do what is right. The echoes of that battle still inspire us to face our own giants, whatever form they may take. The conquest of Canaan, mapped out in ancient scrolls and remembered in sacred stories, was not just a military campaign. It was a spiritual journey, a quest to reclaim a world that had once been lost to darkness. Each victory was a step toward a future where humanity could thrive, free from the shadow of the Nephilim. In the end, the story of the Nephilim is a warning and a promise. It reminds us of the dangers of crossing forbidden boundaries, but also of the possibility of redemption. The land, once haunted by giants, is finally at peace, cleansed, renewed, and ready for a new chapter in the human story. So what happens when a creature that's half divine and half mortal dies? You can destroy its body, but what about its spirit? The Bible doesn't say, but the Book of Enoch offers a chilling explanation that has shaped demonology for centuries. According to Enoch, when the Nephilim giants were killed in the flood, their physical bodies died, but their spirits, inherited from their angel fathers, couldn't be destroyed. They were left to wander the earth. God's judgment on them was that their spirits would remain on earth as a plague to humanity. In this ancient view, the spirits of the dead Nephilim are the evil spirits, or demons, we read about in the New Testament. This gives us an origin for demons that's separate from the fallen angels. The original fallen angels, the Watchers, were locked away in the abyss to await judgment, but their children's spirits were cursed to stay here on earth. disembodied, full of hatred for a humanity they were never truly part of, and tormenting people until the end of days. This paints a much more complex picture of the spirit world, suggesting that demonic forces aren't just fallen angels, but the ghostly, tormented souls of their monstrous children. Okay, so why does this strange, ancient story of angel hybrids and giants matter today? Whether you take it as literal history, a cautionary tale, or a metaphor, the Nephilim story offers a powerful way to think about our world. For one, it gives us a different origin for evil. The Adam and Eve story places the seed of sin in human choice. The Nephilim story suggests evil was also an invasive force, a supernatural contamination from the outside. It also shows just how rich and complex ancient beliefs were. It's a reminder that the Bible we have today is the result of centuries of choices, and that other texts like the Book of Enoch were once incredibly influential. They open a window into a world that felt alive with supernatural forces, but ultimately, the story of the Nephilim is a warning about crossing boundaries that shouldn't be crossed. It's a story about the terrible price of mixing the sacred with the profane. It speaks to a deep, primal fear that there are some doors in the universe that should always remain locked. The story of the Nephilim forces us to look past the simple Sunday school lessons and into the stranger, darker corners of ancient texts. It tells us that before our world there was another one, a world of titans and rebellion, a world that had to be erased. The central question remains, were the Nephilim really the hybrid children of fallen angels and human women? The official Bible is cagey, but the oldest traditions and the most detailed ancient texts tell a consistent and frankly terrifying story. A story of a forbidden union that corrupted humanity and forced God to hit the reset button on all of creation. What do you think? Was this a real event, a symbolic myth about human corruption, or something else entirely? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this deep dive into hidden history interesting, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the mysteries of the ancient world. Thanks for watching. Or